While the entire auto industry is thinking about how to deal with new tariffs, one brand stands tall, unshaken, even poised to win big. Rivals are getting ready for price hikes, supply chain chaos, and production headaches. But Honda is in a position to dominate because the company may wear a Japanese badge, but when it comes to building cars for America, Honda is more American than most, and that makes all the difference. We found 6 reasons why Honda CEO is quietly celebrating Trump's tariffs, so let the countdown begin. Number 6. The most American-made automaker around. Things are pretty clear here. According to Cars.com and their American-made index, Honda is among the most American automakers in the market. The badge might be Japanese, but the reality is that when we look at where Honda models are assembled and how many American-made parts they use, it turns out that this manufacturer is actually more American than most other automakers. And this isn't in the context of only comparing it to other Japanese, Korean, and European brands. This includes the big 3 as well. Models from Ford and GM are actually less American than almost every Honda, and Honda CEO Toshihiro Mibe knows that very well. Once again, we can refer to Cars.com and their American-made index. If you check their list, you'll see that 6 out of the top 20 most American-made cars are from Honda. The Honda Passport, Honda Pilot, Honda Ridgeline, and Honda Odyssey are all there, along with 2 Acura crossovers, the RDX and MDX. All these models aren't just assembled in the US, they also rely mostly on American-made parts, which means that once tariffs come into effect, they'll be less affected than their comparable rivals. These 4 Hondas that take some of the leading positions on the list are all assembled in Honda's Lincoln plant in Alabama. All Acura models are produced in 2 Ohio plants along with the Accord. Finally, the 2 most popular models, the Civic and CR-V, are produced in Indiana, though a decent number of them are coming from Canada, which could potentially be one of the rare tariff-related problems in Honda's case, which we'll talk about in a few moments. All in all, though, the most important Honda models you can buy in the US are also US-made. Number 5. No major models are coming from Mexico. Although these new tariffs affect both Mexican and Canadian imports, we all know that Mexico is way more problematic when we talk about the automotive industry. For decades, automakers have been relocating their plants south of the border, all in order to use a cheap labor force, cut production costs, and increase profit. But this has come to an end, and now it turns out that manufacturers that kept production in the US will be at a great advantage. All those Mexican-made cars will force automakers to raise their prices, and the good thing for Honda is that it never moved too much of its production to Mexico. Honda currently has 2 plants in Mexico, but only one of them is focused strictly on car production. Honda's Celaya plant in Guanajuato, where the HR-V, Honda's subcompact crossover, is produced. It's not the most popular model in Honda's portfolio for sure, but it still makes decent sales figures, so we could say that this will have a certain impact on Honda's overall profitability, though not really that significant. The other one, located in El Salto, Jalisco, used to produce CR-Vs, but luckily for Honda, that ended a few years ago, so this plant is now focused on the production of motorcycles for the world's largest motorcycle maker. Number 4. Potential Canada issues will be solved. Let's be perfectly straight. Honda is in a much better position than most rivals, but does it mean that it won't suffer? No, Honda CEO knows that it'll be affected by new tariffs because there's a solid portion of Honda vehicles produced in Alliston, Ontario. What's problematic in particular is that we're talking about 2 super popular models. One is the CR-V, the second best-selling SUV on the market, right behind the RAV4, with over 400,000 units sold last year. The other one is the Civic, the iconic compact car that's been produced in this plant for decades. With all that in mind, it's clear that we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cars coming to the US market from Canada, so Honda will have to absorb this impact in some way. Relocation is one of the possibilities, and if Honda decides on such a move, we presume that the CR-V would be the one to go. That SUV is already produced in big numbers in the Indiana plant, so we might see further expansion in the future. The Civic, on the other hand, is a notably cheaper vehicle, so it should be easier to compensate for the additional production cost. The mitigating circumstance is that these 2 models are both produced in Canada and the US, so we could say that Honda has a pretty flexible system in the way that it can redistribute production across various plants relatively easily, unlike some other automakers that would have to start pretty much all over again, considering that its presence in Mexico and Canada is significant, so there's no word about easy relocation. Number 3. Rivals will bleed much more. As mentioned, every automaker will suffer from new tariffs. The thing is that most of them will suffer more than Honda, and Mibe knows that very well. We already talked about how most Hondas are made in the US and how the Japanese automaker dominates the list of the most US-made cars. So let's take a look at how things are going with the competition now. Toyota, for example, relies a lot on Mexican production, particularly its popular midsize truck, the Tacoma, which is assembled in 2 Mexican plants. For comparison, its direct rival, the Honda Ridgeline, is the most American-made pickup. On top of that, a solid number of RAV4s, America's most popular SUV model, comes from Canada. The big three, on the other hand, have their own problems, especially in the pickup truck segment. The Ram HD, for example, is built in Mexico, and while the light-duty 1500 is assembled in the US, it sources a lot of parts from Mexico, including the base V6 engine. In the case of GM, some of the key parts are sourced from Mexico, while certain versions, mostly fleet models, are assembled in the Silao assembly plant. Ford's case is interesting in particular because even though all trucks, light and Super Duty, are assembled in the US, way too many parts are sourced from Mexico and Canada. For example, EcoBoost engines with 2.7 and 3.5 liters in displacement are the only engines produced in the US. The famous 5-liter Coyote is built in Windsor, Ontario, just like the massive 7.3-liter V8 Godzilla found in Super Duty models, while the super capable 6.7-liter turbo diesel is built in Chihuahua, Mexico. Then comes the compact pickup Maverick, which is assembled in Mexico and also uses numerous components produced south of the border, including the hybrid powertrain as well as the 8-speed transmission for the gas-only version. Number 2. Japan import is another big win for Honda. Although President Trump announced tariffs for other countries as well, the trade deal with Japan stays for now, even though the trade will have to be more balanced in the future. Anyway, aside from trucks, the current import tax on Japanese-made cars is 2.5%, and that works very well for Honda because a couple of its imported models sold in the US market are assembled exclusively in Japan. Like every other Japanese automaker, Honda benefits from this agreement, though not as much as Mazda or Toyota, for example. Still, there are a couple of imported models assembled in the land of the rising sun, which may not be super popular sellers, but play a significant role in building Honda's reputation. Of course, we're talking about the hot hatch Honda Civic Type R and its more luxurious sibling, the Acura Integra Type S. Moreover, the hybrid version of the HR-V comes from Japan, so altogether, these 3 models are not affected by Trump's tariffs for now, and that's a big advantage compared to European and American competition. Number 1. Time works to Honda's advantage. So, what can we conclude from everything that we mentioned in this video? Just like every other automaker, Honda will feel the consequences of the new tariffs, but that won't be as much as in the case of other automakers. Honda's presence in American automotive production is huge, and when compared to key rivals, it does look like Honda relies less on Mexican and Canadian production. With a couple of exceptions, almost the entire lineup is assembled in US plants, while the share of local suppliers is at a high percentage as well. This puts Honda in a better position compared to most rivals. With less reliance on imported parts and cars, it seems like it's one step or two ahead of key competitors, which will have to figure out new supply chains and relocate production of some of their most important models. That may sound simple, but it's a long, complicated, and costly process, and in all this mess, we're not sure how they're going to stand such a financial strain. So we may conclude that at the time, most automakers will be trying to figure out how to avoid tariffs as much as possible. Honda will be in a position to use that money on development and further spread on the market. Because with their current specific position, all of this will allow Honda to keep prices competitive, and these factors will lead to only one road: the ability to further strengthen its market position. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.